Hello again, friends. It's just another day in the life of a military wife, and lately I have been thinking about the phrase loose lips sink ships. It is an expression that I don't really know how often is used anymore. I grew up hearing it, and it does have some significance to the military community and something called OPSEC. So if you are new to the military or not been around military, you may not be familiar with the acronym OPSEC. It stands for Operational Security. And lots of people, and myself included, prior to my husband joining the service, didn't completely understand the reason why military have to be guarded in what they say and how they say it and what you can repeat and can't repeat. So I kind of wanted to go over that. And there's some really fun stories and information I found. I had a blast researching this. And it's not something I really expected to be as fascinating as it is, but the history of operational security for the United States military and how we came, the phrase and our current practices and procedures came to be ended up being more interesting than I expected. So I'm excited to share those with you, as well as cover some just basics for people who this is something new to them. Or for me, always a refresher is a good thing. With the era of social media that we have, it's important to be conscious of what we're sharing online. And social media is not going away. The internet's not going away. And so operational security has an even more applicable purpose in our lives than in past, potentially. And there's also applications that are not military that I hadn't considered that I'd like to share. So that is what we are going to discuss today. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife. All right, well, let's kick this off with the phrase, loose lips sink ships. Where did it come from? Well, it's an American English idiom that means beware of unguarded talk, and it originated with a poster that was put together by the U.S. War Advertising Council. It was a propaganda poster from World War II. And originally, the actual poster said, loose lips might sink ships, but the phrase got shortened and is now a common colloquial term for keep your mouth shut. Anyway, but there's actually a British equivalent that also originated in World War II, and that phrase is careless talk costs lives. And if you look at the history of the United States and almost any country, every major conflict that they've ever been in militarily, there has been a concern with the adversary, the other side, the opponent, gathering information from them. And there's been a general idea that it's important not to share that information, not to be casual with what you say. And that's what these posters in World War II were warning civilians, members of the military, their families about. But it's existed all the way back to the Revolutionary Civil War. There's examples I've heard and read about. So it's not an uncommon concept. However, shockingly enough, even though the concept of there are certain things you shouldn't say to protect our military, there's certain things you shouldn't talk about casually, there was never an official policy or military doctrine established for operational security on what sort of things you shouldn't talk about until the Vietnam War, which absolutely astounded me because I knew of these World War II posters and the phrase loose lips sink ships. So it was just something that I didn't expect to find out, that it wasn't until the Vietnam War that a military doctrine for operational security and the term operational security was established or adopted. So I want to tell you that story. I want to tell you how that came to be. During the Vietnam War, they found that there was a high level of instances where air raids or airstrikes against the Viet Cong were being reported to and they were getting the information up to 8 hours in advance, and they were able to pull out, and it weren't sustaining casualties. It wasn't really affecting them that much. And the U.S. military was surprised because there was relatively, sufficient evidence to suggest that the Viet Cong and the communists had not been able to break our, codes and our ciphers, that our cryptological, tools were working. So the fact that they had the information was puzzling and concerning. So a commission operation basically was launched in 1966 called Purple Dragon to determine how that information was being collected. And most of the information I have about Purple Dragon came from an NSA document written about it, but the document was written in 1993. And it wasn't declassified until 2007. And even though it was declassified, about 50% or more is still blacked out. So it's spotty exactly what happened and what was done. But what they learned in this report that was conveyed was that there was things being said that were being put together by the Viet Cong, and that was how they were figuring out what was going on. And basically that the soldiers and support staff and people needed to be more cautious about what they were saying, because someone would say one little piece of information here and something else would get said there, and it would get pieced together. So maybe the thing you said wasn't super significant, but if it was pieced together with something someone else said and something someone else said, then you could start to get an idea of what might be coming. So with that, they made some strategic changes and training, and they saw a dramatic decrease in the instances where the adversary was able to find out about the airstrikes. And even when they were able to find out ahead of time, the amount of time they had before a strike that they found out was reduced to a half hour from 8 hours. I thought that was rather statistically significant. And it really changed the course of the effectiveness and what was going on with these airstrikes in Vietnam. And as a result, the doctrine of operational security, or OPSEC, became permanently embedded into the United States military and U.S. government, to the point where operational security has now even gone into the private sector. And as I was researching this, I found tons of things about corporate espionage and things like that. I hadn't even considered corporate espionage. And then personal security, because we do live in a technological age with social media and the internet and our lives basically laid out in front of the entire world. The ability for people to find out things about us without us realizing it, due to just little things that we slip in conversations or say or post. It's amazing what people can figure out about us by just snooping. And so operational security definitely applies to the United States military and government, but it also can apply in our lives. Basically, the concept of how much do you really want everyone on the internet to know about you? And what level of privacy do you want in your life? So that's something I'm going to discuss. I want to give you some basic guidelines for operational security in a military sense, and then we'll talk about some other things. Okay, basic guidelines for military. Now, you may or may not have a spouse in the military. You might just have a friend, sibling, child, nephew, niece, someone you know in the military, or who works for the government. So these are just general guidelines, things that it's important to keep in mind. And the service members need to keep this in mind as well. And we'll discuss a little bit more about that end in a bit. But the guidelines I have that I really felt were important, and I looked through a lot of people's different lists, but these are the ones that I felt were the biggest impact to hit on. And the first is, do not post details about missions, deployments, trainings, itineraries, convoys, or locations. That's a lot. But basically, if you are a close family member and your service member is able to tell you details about a mission, deployment, training, their itinerary, a convoy, or locations they're going to be, do not share those things. Do not share them in text messages. Do not share them in private messages. Do not share them in emails, phone calls, or on social media. Do not share them, because those are sensitive. Those are a security risk. If you know that, great. If you don't, that's fine. Just keep it to yourself. When my husband's doing things like that, I just tell people basic stuff like, oh yeah, he's on a mission, or he's out in the field, or he's yada, yada, yada. And most of the time, people who know about the importance of operational security won't ask for extra questions. And if they do, there's times to say, I can't tell you that. Yeah, I can't share that information. And it's not because I'm being coy or, oh, look, I know something you don't know. It's because, yeah, I'm not supposed to. It's a safety thing. It's a safety thing for my service member, and it's a safety thing for the service members that he works with. And it's a safety thing for our country. And also, there are major consequences to breaking those. So, don't share those information. People think that phone calls and texts are secure, and by and large, they tend to be pretty secure in the United States, but there is always a chance there is someone else listening. And that's part of the reason why I jokingly put up that little poster that Empire is listening, that Star Wars one, that it's true. You don't know. You really don't know who's listening. So just be careful. The other thing is, do not post security procedures, response times, or tactics. And don't talk about them either. That's not an appropriate thing to talk about over the phone or in a text message. You might think it's secure, but if you don't know, those just aren't things we should be talking about. They keep our soldiers safe, and they're supposed to say that way. They're not, yeah. So the next one, and honestly, I don't even know a lot of those things. I flat out told my husband, I don't want to know those things. Just don't tell me. Like, if I'm not supposed to talk about it, don't tell me. It's easier that way. That just makes my life easier. So another one is, do not, and this I did not think about. I'm prefacing this. This one was one I hadn't thought about before. It's not something I've ever done, but I had never considered it. So do not reference trends in unit morale or personnel problems. So basically, don't gossip. Please don't gossip on social media about your service member's unit and problems they're having in their unit and problems they're having with certain people. A, it's not appropriate. B, it's not professional. And C, it's not safe. It's just not where you should be going. And so, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Not had a problem with it, but hadn't thought of that one. So wanted to pass that on. The next is don't discuss equipment or lack of equipment, including training equipment. There are things we have that we don't need to discuss or let other people, other countries know about. Our security, our nation's security is our business, not theirs. So again, this falls into another one of those categories where I told my husband, just don't tell me. If I don't need to know, don't tell me. It makes my life a lot easier. This is one that I'm going to share a story with. The next point is be careful with what pictures you take and help your, service member to be cautious about what pictures they are taking. Pictures can have a lot of background details. Also, if you're taking pictures with a digital device like your phone, make sure that the location isn't enabled. Because now when we take pictures with our phones, it tells you what day, time, and geographical location that picture was taken embedded in the photo. And that is information that should not be out there. So there's a lot of times where it's just better, don't do the photo. Just don't. I know that there's a lot of cool things that your service members work with and they get to see, and it's super exciting. Yeah, you just don't need a picture of it though. Then the last one, and this is a very sensitive and important one to remember. Do not ever post information about casualties, whether coalition, our own, or the adversary enemies, before the official release. And in all sincerity, my personal opinion, it's better just to avoid it. If you want to show support for a family that you know that has lost someone, posting on social media is probably not the best idea. Contact that family directly. Contact that unit. Contact the chaplain. Find out how you can meet their needs and show them love and support. Posting on social media is not the way to do it. Maybe after the fact, after the service, if you want to post memories or things you appreciated about that service member, that's different. But I would really talk with the family first, get a feeling of how the family is, where they're at on that sort of stuff, because it might be too much for them. They may want space. They may not want their social media feeds filling up with stuff about the family member that they just lost. So it's important to be considerate about that loss. And that is just something that's very, very important to me. I find that to be something that can be overlooked. And it's just not acceptable to post that information without waiting the proper amount of time and getting, making sure that it's an okay way that you're doing it. So that's the basic guidelines that I came up with, or that I personally felt were important to hit on. I'm going to go back to right now and touch the be careful with what pictures you share. In the process of thinking about OPSEC and all of my experience with it personally, I was like, well, I could share other people's stories, but then I was like, if it's OPSEC, the issue with operational security slip-ups is some of those stories can't be shared because they of the slip-up. And there's a few that I'm well aware of that I just didn't feel would be okay to share. So there is one that I'm going to be kind of brief on the details, but I felt would be good to share about pictures. I think way too often in this day and age of selfies and, 24/7 accessible cameras, we don't always think about what's in the background of our photos and what information our photos are sharing that we did not intend for them to share. And there was an instance with a fellow service member who my husband knew personally, and he had been assigned to work in an area that was not typical for a person in his job description for the military. And he got to work with equipment that he was not normally, going to be around. And he thought it was very exciting and had taken a picture without considering what was in the background and was about to post it. And luckily, another soldier caught him and stopped him and was like, "Hey, dude, you might want to check that." And he's like, realized that there was something in the background, something in that photo that should not have been shared and should not have been photographed. And thankfully, he deleted it. It wasn't an issue. It was all dealt with before it became a significant issue. But had he posted that picture, he could have very easily gotten into massive amounts of trouble and had an investigation done on him. And I have heard of instances with people actually going through military process, like military judicial proceedings, and even being given some jail time because of things that were in the backgrounds of their photos that they didn't pay attention to. So it's better to just avoid taking the photo. Thankfully, in that instance, it was caught in time and nothing happened and everything was okay. But you just don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy. So be careful. You don't want to be that spouse either. There has been countless instances where I have heard stories, and again, it's always been a friend of a friend of a friend, or some rumor, and of some spouse that shared on social media the troop movements, and so they had to be changed, and the service member got punished, and it just caused issues, and no one wants to be that wife. No one wants to be that family member. So just, avoid it. It's so much easier to just not go there. And in all sincerity, this is where it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I have known several spouses who have, or family members even, of military service members who have been very hurt or offended that they didn't know what their service member was doing and where they were at and what was going on and when they were going to be home and all of that stuff. And because of operational security, there are just times where that information cannot be shared. It's not safe. It's not safe for the service member. It's not safe for you. And it's just easier in your personal life to not go there. And early on in my husband's career, I told him, you know what? Just don't tell me. It's okay. You don't have to tell me. I trust you. I know you'll be home when you can be home. And if you can't tell me, you can't tell me. And I would just much rather not know, because then I don't have to watch what I say and tell people, sorry, I can't tell you that, and all sorts of stuff. It's better for me just to not know. I'm completely comfortable with that. And so if you know that you're the kind of person who can absent-mindedly say things that maybe should not be said, it might just be better for your service member to not tell you things. And it takes a lot of maturity for you to tell them, please don't tell me. I trust you. I love you. I support you. It's better if I don't know. And my husband tells me what he can. And we do stuff together. And I vaguely understand his job. There's things I don't understand about his job because I'm not supposed to. And I'm okay with that. And I know that depending on what the service member's job is, that can be an even greater amount of things that you can't talk about. So find something else to talk about. Find some common interests, find some hobbies, talk about something else. That said, I wanted to wrap this up with a personal security angle. We live, like I said, in a technological age. Social media is not going anywhere. And it is important for us to stop and think before we share things about ourselves, our friends, our families, on the internet, online. Because we don't know who's listening. We don't know who's watching. You can have all sorts of securities put into place. You can have a VPN. You can have your privacy settings maxed. You can have all of that. But there's still a company that's got that information, and who knows who they're selling it to. And there's still people who share it. There's been instances all over the news, and you're probably well aware of them, of people being in a group text with someone and thinking that they were sharing something in a secure setting, and someone photocopying, or like not photocopying, but snapping pictures of the conversation and giving it to a reporter or someone else. You just don't know. And the other thing is, especially with children, because I'm really protective about what I put out about my children. I want my children to be able to develop their own identities. I don't want to restrict their opportunities by what I say and share about them as they're growing up. I had the blessing of growing up before social media was a thing. And even when it was a thing, my father too, was very, actually, yeah, everyone's been really respectful and not shared things about me. Mistakes I've made, poor decisions, because we all have those things. We're human. We all make mistakes. And we should be able to have the dignity of learning and growing through our formative years without everyone watching every mistake we have and sharing it with the world. And I personally want that for my children. I am so grateful that I was given that blessing of being able to become who I am without the world watching my every step. And I want my children to have that too. And so I am careful with what I share and how I share things with family. And it's hard. It's super hard with everyone living so far away from each other, with COVID, with everything else. It's hard to stay close and to share those things and stay connected. And social media makes it so easy, but sometimes it makes it too easy to share things that shouldn't be shared, not publicly. That's one reason why I'm so grateful for video chats, Zoom, things like that. Those can even be recorded. Now, normally you have to tell, you can tell if someone's recording those things, but you have to be careful with those too. But those are another safe way to share with family who is far away. That is a more protective means of doing it. So make sure you understand what your cybersecurity is and that you're paying attention to that, because your family's privacy is important. Your privacy is important. And your personal security is important. Your personal safety is important. And I think the more that we understand and appreciate those aspects of our lives, the easier it is to understand and appreciate the reason and importance for operational security for our military. And that kind of was a little heavier note than I was intending to end on, but it's true. It's our job to protect our privacy, and we need to take it as seriously. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the stories and information I shared. And yeah, it was, like I said, a lot of fun to research this topic. I'm going to be including tons of links in the description of my resources that I found, other resources I found interesting so that you can look them up. The NSA report that I found, I couldn't figure out how to link it, but you can Google it, search it, get on DuckDuckGo. It's out there. So yeah, Operation Purple Dragon is what it was called, and it was declassified, as much as they're going to declassify it, back in 2007. So the information's out there. It's a fascinating read. I at least personally thought it was a fascinating read. And with that said, I have another great announcement. We are now on iHeartRadio. This podcast is. So more options, more ways to listen. And I really appreciate all the feedback I get. And if there are any topics you want me to cover, or there are questions you have about operational security, just stuff you want to share, feel free to please go to the Facebook page, go to the comment sections wherever you're listening to this, and share those. I do read them. I do pay attention to them. Also, shoot me an email, and I will, if it's applicable with your permission, share it in a show. And if you have something you want me to talk about, I'm more than willing to research it. If it has to do with the military and military life, it's fair game. I really do enjoy learning more as I put this podcast together for you. So, that said, this has been a really long episode, and I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife.